London, July 11th, 2025. 9 days have passed since a seemingly routine morning talk show appearance detonated into the most combustible royal controversy of the summer, and the embers show no sign of cooling. At the center of the storm stand two figures whose names rarely shared the same headline until now. Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, and Angela Levin, veteran royal biographer and former war correspondent, who exchanged the familiar caution of palace reporting for the explosive candor of live television. Her indictment, compressed into 13 unscripted minutes, did what neither the Sussexes Netflix docuseries nor the palace's months of strategic silence could achieve. It galvanized a global audience to revisit, with forensic attention, the question of whether the prince's post-monarchy brand is a bold reinvention or a slow-motion self-immolation. The spark was struck at precisely 8:17 a.m. British summertime on July 2nd, during the third block of ITV's flagship breakfast program, Sunrise UK. Producers had billed Levin's appearance as a reflective chat on the coronation's lingering cultural resonance, a safe midweek segment unlikely to ruffle feathers now that Westminster's bunting has been folded away and the nation has sunk back into cost of living concerns. Yet the mood inside Studio B shifted perceptibly when host Daniel Fraser broached what everyone assumed was a perfunctory footnote: Prince Harry's 28-hour fly and fly-out attendance at King Charles III's coronation 6 weeks earlier. Leaning forward, Levin inhaled once, folded her notes, and used for the remainder of the interview, and issued a critique so blistering that Fraser visibly stiffened, later admitting in a backstage podcast that he felt the temperature in the control room drop 10 degrees and climb 30 all at once. Levin's opening salvo framed the prince's cameo as pure optics. What we witnessed was not a dutiful son honoring ancestral ritual, she said, her diction measured but her delivery tungsten hard. It was a precision-timed brand cameo crafted to harvest coverage without the inconvenience of intimacy. The phrase ricocheted instantly across X, formerly Twitter, where social media monitors tracking sentiment spikes watched the clip rack up 500,000 views within 42 minutes. Aides to the Sussexes, waking in Montecito at 0:17 local time, scrambled to assemble a summary before the UK morning cycle ended. By dawn in California, network bookers from Sydney to Toronto had madly clipped, subtitled, and reposted Levin's comments, each outlet tagging the Sussex communication team for rebuttal. What distinguished Levin's broadside from the routine grumblings of Fleet Street was its ruthlessly linear narrative. She began with the coronation optics, Harry's solitary arrival, his conspicuous absence from both the Buckingham Palace balcony and the family luncheon at Windsor, the viral freeze frame of his unsmiling profile beside the Abbey's Cosmedy pavement, and used them as the prologue to a far broader bill of indictment. The Netflix series, the Spotify podcast, the Oprah confessional, the 410-page memoir Spare, the constant, clock-like emergence of sources close to the Sussexes previewing. Reconciliation just as a fresh media property prepared to launch. Levin's voice stayed calm, yet every sentence functioned like an evidence tile snapped into a mosaic of alleged opportunism. Crucially, she spoke not as a palace mouthpiece, but as someone who had once enjoyed direct access to the prince during her 2018 biography of Prince Harry, a project undertaken when his public favor hovered near its zenith, an Afghanistan veteran championing wounded soldiers, a modern royal fiancé turning the monarchy's racial homogeneity on its head, a groom stepping to the altar with Hollywood's first biracial duchess. That proximity lent her critique an intimacy that viewers instinctively recognized. When Levin described Harry's straight-backed confidence sliding like a visor over private unease, she tapped into hours spent observing him behind interview cameras, jotting notes as he fiddled with charity wristbands and recalled therapy sessions. The betrayal, she implied, was not merely of family, but of self. A transformation from purpose-driven veteran to perennial headline act addicted to cliffhanger confession. Her language grew sharper as she mapped what she called an algorithm of grief. She cited 6 instances, complete with dates and airtime, when reconciliation overtures leaked days before media drops. The September 2022 voiceover cameo, teasing Netflix. the December 2023 podcast pilot coinciding with rumors of a Christmas truce. The January 2024 serialization of spare chapters in the Times ahead of Harry's surprise visit to King Charles at Clarence House. The April 2024 whispered plan for Easter at Sandringham overshadowed by Meghan's trademark filings for a wellness brand. And, most recently, the May 2025 coronation approach overshadowing a forthcoming Audible original exploring unresolved royal trauma. On screen, producers flashed timeline graphics in real time, each arrow punctuated by the sound effect of a gavel, an editorial flourish that later drew complaints from Sussex lawyers who deemed it gratuitous, prejudicial theater. Levin's thesis crescendoed to a phrase already quoted in nearly every language with an online news bureau. This is not contrition. It is choreography. She likened Harry's cycles of revelation to serialized Victorian penny shockers. Every chapter ends on a rafter creaking cliffhanger, obliging readers to part with another tuppence next week. The analogy, bridging 19th century melodrama and 21st century streaming economics, landed with the force of epiphany for many viewers who had consumed Sussex content piecemeal without recognizing the pattern. From there, Levin pivoted to the most incendiary accusation: emotional blackmail. She argued that Harry's reconciliation overtures peak in media visibility precisely when the monarchy confronts vulnerability. The late Queen's ailing months, King Charles's malignancy diagnosis, Princess Catherine's post-operative seclusion. She stopped short of calling these strategic moves a shakedown, yet the implication shimmered beneath her cadence. Empathy deployed as leverage, trauma framed as transactional collateral. Outrage was immediate and complicated. Sussex loyalists, many of whom identify as survivors of racial bias or toxic family systems, lambasted Levin's framing as victim-blaming dressed in tweed. They circulated screenshots of Harry at 12, eyes rimmed crimson behind his mother's coffin, noting that the British press never extends the same clinical vocabulary to Prince Andrew's scandals. Yet an equal torrent of voices, including erstwhile supporters, expressed fatigued agreement. One viral TikTok from a Gen Z commentator panned across shells of spare audio overlay quoting Levin's grief commodity line, captioned, "When activism becomes algorithm." The clip amassed 8.2 million views in 48 hours, suggesting the critique resonated beyond traditional royal watching demographics. Polling companies moved with rare speed. Whitfield Insights, whose royal favorability tracker surveys 1,500 UK adults weekly, detected a 7-point net favorability drop for Prince Harry between June 28th and July 5th, the steepest single-week descent since the Sussex exit deal in 2020. Meanwhile, in the US, where Harry historically outperformed his homeland in popularity metrics, Marston Analytics found a 5-point dip among independents and a 9-point tumble among older Democrats, a cohort once charmed by the Sussexes' social justice rhetoric. Analysts attribute the U.S. erosion to saturation. American attention spans crave newness. Marston's director explained on CNN. Repetition without escalation generates indifference, then irritation. That irritation now carries potential commercial cost. Insider sources at a major streaming service, one that inked a multi-project first-look deal with Archwell Productions, confide that executive committees convened 2 sensitivity audits to assess whether further Sussex content risks diminishing returns. Advertisers, spooked by the phrase 24-hour grievance cycle, are reportedly pressuring networks to demonstrate that any future series will foreground charity outcomes more than family friction. Feel-good sells, feuds plateau, one advertising buyer summarized. In publishing, whispers swirl that Penguin Random House is cool toward a second memoir unless it pivots away from royal fallout toward Harry's environmental campaigning or veteran advocacy, areas less guaranteed to spur legal pushback, but perhaps more likely to bore the rubbernecking masses. Ironically, the backlash may jeopardize precisely the philanthropic work once considered Harry's ace. Executives at the Invictus Games Foundation, speaking off the record, confessed frustration that media coverage of injured servicemen now routinely sidelines itself to weigh in on the prince's latest family rift. The games never sought royal soap opera. It sought recovery spotlights, one aide lamented. Major donors, sensitive to brand risk, have quietly inquired whether Invictus can rely on surrogate spokespeople should the Sussex Association sour further. Although no funds have been withdrawn, board minutes reveal a contingency discussion. An unthinkable scenario 3 years ago when the Vancouver Whistler 2025 Games bid leaned heavily on Harry's personal charisma to woo sponsors. If the financial complexion looks unsettled, the legal terrain appears equally thorny. Levin's remarks have prompted renewed debate over the enforceability of the Sandringham Summit exit agreement, that 3-page letter of understanding hashed out in January 2020 between the late Queen, Prince Charles, Prince William, and Harry. Sources with knowledge of the document say it contains no explicit gag clause, only a mutual respect undertaking pledging each party to uphold the dignity of the crown and safeguard the privacy of family dialogue. Constitutional lawyers argue that while the pledge is morally binding, it lacks enforcement teeth absent a demonstrable commercial breach. Could the monarchy sue its own duke for reputational harm? The mere suggestion sends palace press officers scurrying. The optics of a father dragging his son through discovery would dwarf even Meghan's 2020 copyright battle with the Mail on Sunday in acrimony. Behind palace walls, however, the conversation tilts increasingly toward containment. 2 independent sources confirm the Lord Chamberlain commissioned a confidential options paper analyzing historical remedies deployed against rogue royals. From the 18th century Act of Settlement dowries that tethered errant princes with stipends contingent on good behavior, to Edward VIII's post-abdication allowance structured to vanish if he stepped foot in Britain without invitation. The memorandum reportedly concludes that withholding the last tranche of Harry's sovereign grant repayment, a condition of the Frogmore Cottage lease termination, would be both lawful and symbolically potent, though critics argue it would only embolden Harry to produce content that recoups the shortfall. Even if the monarchy opts for forbearance, British public opinion courts less patience. Tabloids, sensing rare alignment with broadsheet editorial boards, now overlay photos of Harry's Santa Barbara polo outings with ticker-style counts of negative headlines he has generated, a journalistic device borrowed from environmental coverage, days without pipeline spill. Satellite radio hosts hold call in polls posing the question, should Harry relinquish his place in the succession? Constitutional experts reply that removal would require an act of parliament, improbable given government preoccupation with inflation and defense pacts. Still, the chatter underscores how swiftly public discourse can vault from celebrity gossip to constitutional hypotheticals when monarchy is the subject. For scholars of media ethics, the saga doubles as a cautionary tale about the limits of self-narration. Dr. Inez Fowler, author of The Selfie Throne, Power and Persona in Digital Monarchies, observed that the Sussexes attempted to pivot from inherited symbolism to participatory storytelling. But storytelling is a feral beast. It devours fresh plot lines voraciously and then turns hungry on its own protagonists. Fowler notes that when every chapter is marketed as revelation, audiences adjust their threshold for novelty upward, forcing content creators to dig ever deeper into private vaults. Eventually, she writes, one excavates relational bedrock or strikes a rock face of family rebuttal. Either way, the drilling cannot continue indefinitely without collapse. Given that, Levin's remedy, silence, poses a paradox. On paper, it appears straightforward. Private apologies, zero cameras, acts of service conducted off-grid. In practice, such monastic restraint would mean sacrificing the momentum that underwrites the Sussexes' Montecito overhead, a 14-acre estate, multi-million-dollar security details, and legal teams fronting simultaneous lawsuits against paparazzi agencies and tabloid publishers on 2 continents. Without the oxygen of media appearance fees, book advances, and visual rights deals, the economic equation unravels. Archwell's IRS filings for 2024 list $14.2 million in philanthropic disbursements against $21 million in partner-contributed revenue, the vast majority linked to branded content. Should the content pipeline stall, donors could shrink, jeopardizing both charitable grants and the Sussexes' ability to self-fund security after losing taxpayer-backed Metropolitan Police protection in 2020. Thus, the choice facing Harry is neither purely moral nor purely financial, but a Gordian blend of both. Remain vocal and risk permanent brand spoilage. Go dark and risk short-term liquidity crunch. Some advisors propose a third way. Pivot from autobiographical confessionals to externally focused documentaries where Harry narrates others' stories, refugee crises, veteran rehabilitation, while appearing on screen only in moderating doses. Yet skeptics question whether networks will bankroll such projects absent the irresistible hook of royal family intrigue. They buy Harry to get Windsor, one studio commissioner quipped anonymously. If they want a frontline, they'd license PBS. Meanwhile, Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, navigates collateral turbulence. While she was not the direct subject of Levin's tirade, her brand is inextricably linked. Archetypes Media, the company behind her now concluded Spotify series on female stereotypes, was mid-negotiation with Amazon's Audible division for a follow-up title, Perspectives, focusing on motherhood and identity. Industry reporters say Audible placed talks on temporary hold pending brand risk reassessment, though both parties publicly claim scheduling conflicts. Fashion houses, too, are reportedly anxious. A British luxury label considering Meghan for a global ambassadorship in 2026 now faces shareholder queries about drama adjacency, an investor relations euphemism for PR volatility. While the Sussex camp treads water, Angela Levin's media stock has soared. Her publisher fast-tracked a revised paperback edition of her 2018 biography, appending a 60-page afterword titled The Brand That Ate Itself. Pre-orders surged to number 3 on the Sunday Times non-fiction chart within 2 days. She has fielded invitations from Australian Breakfast TV, Canada's CBC, and a South African current affairs podcast specializing in post-colonial monarchy critique. Critics accuse her of profiteering from the very spectacle she condemns. She replies that scrutiny and profiteering are uneasy cousins in any commercial media ecosystem. The irony is self-evident. The cycle she called toxic now lifts her profile higher than any single book tour could. Still, Levin insists her objective was never personal aggrandizement, but to hold a mirror to what she views as a prince drifting toward irreparable caricature. In an interview with Paris Match, she recounted a 2017 sit-down with Harry, then 33, in which he spoke tenderly of wanting to be ordinary enough that my kids forget I wore a uniform at my wedding. Levin claims that memory haunts her. The boy who craved normalcy has become an avatar of perpetual abnormal drama. Whether one believes her sincerity or critiques her timing, the quote circulates because it resonates. It touches a collective yearning for the untelevised quietude that monarchy once symbolized, even to its detractors. At Westminster, parliamentarians eye the saga from the periphery, gauging whether public frustration with royal overexposure will translate into calls to curtail sovereign grant funds or re-examine the 2011 Sovereign Grant Act. So far, cross-party appetite for constitutional upheaval remains minimal. A cost of living spike, NHS waiting lists, and NATO commitment command legislative bandwidth. Yet early career MPs sense a generational shift. When my constituents say, I'm sick of Harry, they're not anti-monarchist, says Labour backbencher Priya Das. They're anti-soap opera. Das contends that if the palace fails to stem drama, Republican lobbying groups could exploit fatigue to argue the monarchy no longer provides stability, but distraction. It is against this intricate backdrop that the monarchy's private response unfolds. 2 palace aides confirm there is no appetite to issue public rebuttals to Levin. Doing so would dignify her critique and risk prolonging the news cycle. Instead, courtiers are said to favor a sonorous silence punctuated by quiet door openings, code for offering Harry the chance to reconcile privately, provided he arrives without camera crews or subsequent press leaks. One aide likened the approach to laying out a rug and waiting to see if the cat returns when he's cold enough. Whether Harry finds the prospect of tail-tucked return palatable is another matter entirely. Friends say he remains bruised by a perception that the palace leaks negative briefings against him while demanding his discretion in return. So, where does that leave the prince at this critical juncture? Sources suggest he is in the foothills of what public relations strategists call brand triage, a period of intense data gathering, focus groups, sentiment analysis, scenario planning, before decisive moves. The Sussex digital team reportedly contracted a San Francisco firm specializing in narrative heat mapping, employing machine learning models to predict backlash amplitude across demographic clusters if certain storylines are pursued. The consultancy's previous clients include Fortune 50 CEOs embroiled in scandal and a Grammy-winning pop star navigating a fandom implosion after divisive political tweets. But a century-old axiom of British journalism hovers. No algorithm yet devised can model the caprice of royal intrigue. Princes have weathered worse storms, adultery, abdication, even covert Nazi sympathies, and emerged with public standing bruised but intact. The difference, analysts note, is velocity. Edward VIII's abdication drama unfolded across telegrams and newsprint. Andrew's BBC disaster matured over months. Harry's narrative swings now unfold in hours, if not minutes, each twist captured, recaptioned, and memed at the speed of swipe. Royal historian Professor Amelia Knox argues that the monarchy's innate slowness once shielded it, allowing time for emotion to cool. In the digital epoch, she says, the crown's lag is no longer strategic, it is a liability. By the time the palace drafts a considered statement, the internet has already judged. Knox's observation dovetails with Levin's on-air admonition that Harry rediscover the power of the unsaid. The phrase has spawned think pieces in The Atlantic, Die Zeit, and Asahi Shimbun, each interrogating whether 2025's content economy leaves any oxygen for dignified silence. Influencers have ironically turned the quote into a speaking circuit tagline, charging for seminars on strategic quiet. Perhaps the deepest irony of all, Harry, who once lamented the monarchy's code of never complain, never explain, may now need to adopt that very code to preserve the last shards of credibility his independence was meant to amplify. As dawn breaks on the 10th day since Levin's appearance, satellite trucks still line the cul-de-sac near the Sussex estate. In London, reporters loiter outside Kensington Palace, parsing facial tics of aides ferrying manila envelopes. Podcasts queue up round-table episodes titled Silence Watch Day 10, where commentators monitor the prince's digital channels for any flicker of response. Thus far, nothing. Not a tweet, not a panel discussion cameo, not a single paparazzo photograph showing Harry sprinting from a yoga studio to a waiting SUV. An eerie calm blankets the usual chatter, like the eye of a hurricane where even seasoned pundits wonder whether it signals capitulation, regrouping, or the poised breath before another barrage. It may be weeks, even months, before the next definitive move. Perhaps we will see headlines about a confidential father-son weekend at Balmoral, leaked after the fact by a passer by spotting a ginger-bearded man at Aberdeen Airport. Perhaps a new series will emerge, this time stewarded by veteran documentarians who pledge to keep the cameras on activist causes, not ancestral grievances. Or perhaps the royal family will convene beneath Balmoral's staghorn chandeliers, phones surrendered at the door, to negotiate a covenant of silence that outlaws mutual briefings and caps book advances tied to palace reminiscence.